Hello, everyone. Tonight we are standing in the hush of a prehistoric twilight, where the only sounds are the crunch of your bare feet on cold gravel and the distant whisper of wind through towering stone pillars. Shadows stretch long and strange across the cave mouth ahead, and you're about to do something your modern self probably can't explain. You're about to speak to a rock. And no, I'm not kidding. But hey, you probably won't survive long out here if you don't at least try to make friends with the terrain, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from tonight and what time it is for you. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You shuffle along the narrow gorge, the stone walls rising like giant jaws on either side. The air smells like damp earth and moss, and under your fingertips the rock is cold, so cold it seems to drink the warmth from your skin. You pause before a massive upright slab, its surface dappled by age and lichen. And for reasons no scholar will ever fully explain, you whisper to it. Maybe it's a plea for luck, maybe a nervous greeting. Historians still debate whether these murmurs were prayers, warnings, or simply the first echoes of loneliness. Your breath forms tiny clouds as you speak. The rock naturally says nothing, but something in its presence fills the silence, a kind of weight that makes your heartbeat thrum louder in your ears. Fun fact: the oldest confirmed petroglyphs we've found, those deliberate scratches and shapes on rock faces, are over 40,000 years old, made long before the first wheel or written word. Maybe someone like you, knelt by a stone and decided to leave a mark to start a conversation that could outlast flesh and bone. The cave's mouth beckons darker than the night sky, and you step inside, brushing past a curtain of ivy that clings like cold fingers. It smells of wet ash, and something older, the lingering scent of ancient fires. You can feel the smooth stone underfoot, polished not by design, but by the countless bare souls of those who came before you. A glint catches your eye, a flake of quartz embedded in the wall, winking like a star trapped in blackness. Nice nightlight, you mutter. Though the joke falls flat in the heavy dark, you sit beside the slab, your hands resting on its cool surface. If you listen, really listen, you might imagine the stone listening too. There's no reply, but the rock doesn't judge. It simply is as it always was. Oddly enough, did you know that some hermit crabs use pieces of rock as makeshift armor when they can't find a proper shell? Nature always finds a use for stone, even if it's just as a shield. You try again. Your voice echoes faintly, bouncing back from the cavern walls. Maybe the stone absorbs your words, storing them deep within its heart like a secret. Maybe this was the first purpose of a language, not to talk to one another, but to talk to the world around us, to rocks, trees, rivers. Things that didn't answer but listened without end. Outside, the wind rises, making the cave mouth hum like a low flute. You glance back at the entrance, half expecting a response from the stone itself. Would be nice if you had some advice, you whisper with a grin. But no answer comes. Just the endless, patient presence of the stone, its surface cold and unmoved. Historians still debate whether these early encounters with stone were born from awe, fear, or simply the human need to connect. What's certain is that long before temples or cities, people found comfort in these dialogues with the inanimate. The rock was always there after all. It wouldn't leave, wouldn't betray, wouldn't change. The night grows deeper, the stars invisible behind thick clouds. You lie back, letting the stone cradle your spine. The cold seeps through your skin, but there's a strange comfort in it, like leaning against the bones of the earth itself. Somewhere deep in your mind, you imagine the stone replying not in words, but in the steady, silent reassurance of its existence. And so, under that heavy sky with only the wind and the stone for company, you drift towards sleep, wondering if those first whispers were ever answered, or if we've always been speaking to the silence, hoping it might one day speak back. You wake to the soft drip-drip of water seeping through the cracks overhead, the cave's slow breath filling the air with a cool mineral tang. The stone slab is still beneath you, unyielding, as if it's been waiting for your next word all night. You stretch bones creaking and run your fingers across its rough surface, feeling the faintest groove scratches made by hands not so different from yours thousands upon thousands of years ago. These marks, you realize, might have been the first carved reply. The stone couldn't speak, so someone gave it a voice. The scratchings aren't random. You trace the line of a spiral, the edge of what might be an antler or a hand. Historians still debate whether these early carvings were records of hunts, maps of stars, or something deeper, messages meant for spirits, or even for the rock itself. One thing's clear: at some point, humanity's whispers turn to marks, as if trying to force the stone to answer in kind. There's a strange thrill in touching these ancient etchings. It's like shaking hands across time. Fun fact for your next awkward conversation starter: the world's oldest confirmed cave art in places like El Castillo in Spain features red discs and hand stencils more than 40,000 years old. That's older than the last ice age, older than the idea of farming, older than shoes. And somewhere, a person crouched just like you are now, pressing pigment or sharp stone to the wall, saying, "I was here. I spoke." The rock listened. You rise and step deeper into the cave. The flickering light from your makeshift torch, just a stick smeared with animal fat and lit at one end, throws shapes on the walls that almost look like figures. Your shadow merges with those of long-gone carvers, the lines between now and then blurring until you can almost hear their breath, smell the tang of their sweat and the smoke of their fires. It's as if the carvings themselves summon the past stone, turned into a kind of memory you can see and touch. You pause at a section of wall where the scratches form patterns so intricate they seem to hum beneath your fingertips. A series of intersecting lines, dots, and spirals, a language without words maybe, but a language nonetheless. One that spoke across generations, across the rise and fall of countless moons. Historians still can't agree on what these shapes truly mean. Are they records of great hunts? Calendars of seasons? Prayers? Warnings? Or were they just early doodles, cave graffiti left by bored teenagers while their parents hunted mammoths? Either way, the carvings are here. They endure where voices fade. The stone remembers even when people forget. You run your hand over a deep groove shaped like a crescent. Looks like a smile, you mutter, your voice echoing softly. For a moment, the cave feels less lonely. Maybe that's what the first artists felt too, like they were making company out of stone. Speaking of stone art, did you know? The Venus of Hohlefels, a tiny carved figurine found in Germany, is over 35,000 years old. She's tiny, about the size of your thumb, but she carries the weight of a world's worth of silent stories. Outside, the wind howls again, but here in the cave it's calm. The stone, a shelter and a companion. You lean against the wall, eyes tracing the carvings, and wonder if those first marks felt as powerful to their makers as they do to you now. A voice that couldn't be heard but could be seen, could last. And here's a thought that might keep you up tonight. Historians still debate whether the shift from whispered prayers to carved symbols was a moment of inspiration or just a slow, accidental evolution. Someone scratching out boredom, another adding to it until meaning crept in like moss on stone. You smirk and tap the rock lightly as if to say thanks for the company. The sound rings soft and hollow but satisfying, like knocking on an old friend's door. The stone doesn't reply, of course. It never does. But somehow it feels like it's listening. You step back into the night, leaving the cave and its silent carvings behind, but not before glancing once more at that smiling crescent. You promise yourself you'll return, because once you start talking to rocks, it's hard to stop. The stone has a way of making you feel heard even when it says nothing at all. The dawn is pale and hesitant, streaking the horizon with colors that look like they've been smudged on by a lazy hand. You stand on a wind-swept plateau now, miles from the cave where great boulders litter the land like the bones of some ancient beast. The air is sharp, the kind that stings your nose and makes you blink. And there among the stones, you hear it, the low, rhythmic hum of voices carried on the breeze. You follow the sound, stepping between the scattered giants of rock until you see them. A small band of figures cloaked in furs stands in a rough circle around a massive boulder. Their voices rise and fall, chanting in a language long forgotten, their words tumbling over the stone surface like water over riverbed. You creep closer, the grass wet beneath your feet, and listen as they sing to the rock, singing not just at it, but to it as if expecting it to join in. And who knows, maybe they believed it would. Historians still debate whether these chants were meant to awaken spirits, charm the land, or simply soothe the chanter's own fears in a wild and indifferent world. You watch as one of the group steps forward, laying both hands against the boulder's rough skin. The chant grows softer, more intimate, like a lullaby for the earth itself. You can't help but smile. This is what it means to talk to rocks, isn't it? To try and coax a reply from something that has always been silent. It's kind of sweet, really. Like leaving voice messages on a number you know no one will ever answer. Oh, the wind picks up, tugging at your hair, and the boulder hums beneath the singer's palms. Not because it answers, of course, but because the wind sings its own song through cracks and hollows. Still, for a heartbeat, it feels as if the stone is joining in. Fun fact to drop at your next awkward party: in parts of Siberia and Mongolia, nomadic peoples still believe certain stones can hold spirits or grant wishes if properly addressed. They decorate these stones with cloth or paint and leave offerings to them. Because why not? Talking to rocks is one of humanity's oldest hobbies. You move closer, feeling the vibration of the chant in your chest until one of the singers notices you and beckons. You hesitate, then step into the circle, the boulder looming over you like a slumbering giant. The surface is pitted and cracked, patches of lichen spreading like age spots across its face. Someone hands you a bone flute, the mouthpiece polished smooth by countless lips. You lift it, blow a tentative note, and the sound wavers, thin and reedy, but it weaves into the chant like a thread into cloth. For a moment, the world feels smaller, the distance between human and stone less vast. The chant, the flute, the rock, they all become part of the same conversation, a dialogue carried out in breath, tone, and touch. Historians still argue whether these rituals were born from genuine belief in the rock's power, or whether they were more about bringing people together, forging community through shared mystery. The chant fades at last, and the group disperses, their breath misting in the cold air. You linger, resting a hand against the boulder's flank. The stone is cool and steady, a constant in a world that's always shifting. You murmur a quiet goodbye, feeling faintly silly but also comforted. The rock may not answer, but it listens in its own way. As you turn to leave, you notice something odd. A cluster of small stones carefully balanced atop the boulder's crown, as if someone tried to build a cairn or crown it king of its kind. The stones look precarious, ready to tumble with the next strong wind, but they hold. You grin. Maybe that's the rock's reply, not words, but balance. Endurance. A reminder that even the heaviest burdens can support something delicate. And here's a strange tidbit. Certain birds, like Australian lyrebirds, have been observed mimicking the sound of human tools striking stone, weaving those sounds into their calls. Imagine that, a creature of flesh learning the language of rock, then singing it back to us. Proof, maybe, that we're not the only ones trying to get stones to talk. You leave the plateau with the wind at your back and the boulder's silent song in your mind, wondering what other conversations the rocks might be waiting to have. And maybe, just maybe, you hum a few notes yourself as you walk, hoping the next stone will hum back. The day wears on, and you find yourself wandering deeper into wild country where the land seems stitched together by stone. Jagged outcrops jut from the earth like the spines of a sleeping monster, and everywhere you look, great hunks of rock crouch in the tall grass as if waiting for some ancient purpose to call them awake. The air is dry here, the wind sharp enough to cut, and yet you feel drawn onward, pulled by the promise of something hidden. It's then that you see it half buried in a hollow between two hills, a massive stone so dark it seems to drink the sunlight. You approach slowly, feet crunching on loose gravel, heart thudding louder with each step. This isn't just any rock, you can feel it in your bones. This is a sacred stone, one of those rare guardians our ancestors believed could hold the secrets of the ages. And maybe, just maybe, you think it's time for another chat. You place a palm on its pitted surface. It's warm from the sun, a rare kindness in this hard land. You whisper again words you barely understand yourself. A question, perhaps, or a plea. Historians still debate whether these sacred stones were believed to contain the spirits of ancestors, or whether they were simply chosen for their size and strangeness, a kind of prehistoric monument to the unknown. Around the base of the stone, you notice small offerings, smooth pebbles arranged in rings, scraps of hide, bits of bone bleached white by the sun. Someone else was here not long ago speaking to this same rock, hoping for wisdom or favor. You kneel, adding your own token, a feather plucked from your cloak, and for a moment you feel a little less alone. Fun fact: in parts of the British Isles, ancient hold stones were believed to cure illness if you spoke your ailment through the opening. People literally talked to the rock, hoping it would draw out the sickness. The wind picks up, tugging at your hair, and the stone seems to hum beneath your touch, not because it answers, of course, but because of the way the wind whistles through the cracks. Still, you can't shake the feeling that the rock is listening, holding your words the way it holds the sun's warmth deep in its core. You circle the stone, running your fingers along grooves worn by countless hands. Some of the marks are deliberate symbols carved with care, shapes that might be eyes or suns, or spirals leading who knows where. Others are simply the scars of time, the work of rain and wind and frost. Historians still puzzle over the meaning of these carvings. Were they prayers, maps, warnings? Or were they meant for the stone itself, a way of feeding it the stories it was believed to guard? A shadow flickers at the edge of your vision, and you glance up to see a hawk wheeling high above, its cry lost in the wind. You smile, thinking how even the birds seem to pay their respects to this ancient guardian. And speaking of birds, did you know that crows have been observed leaving shiny objects near human-made monuments? Maybe they're trying to talk to the stones too, or maybe they're just showing off. You sit at the base of the stone, letting its solid presence anchor you. The world feels vast out here, the sky too wide, the earth too empty. But the stone is constant. You speak again, softer this time, sharing thoughts you wouldn't dare voice to another soul. The stone keeps your secrets as it always has. As the sun sinks lower, the shadows stretch long and strange across the land, and you rise, brushing dust from your hands. You give the stone a final pat like you might a loyal dog and turn away. The wind carries your parting words, and the stone remains, watching, waiting, silent, but never unhearing. Night falls with the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. You walk beneath a sky scraped clean of clouds, the stars scattered like seeds across black velvet. The air is cold, crisp enough that each breath feels like it might crack your ribs, but you keep moving, drawn by a glow on the horizon. A flicker of firelight, the promise of other souls. And soon, there it is, a small clearing where figures move around a cluster of stones that stand like silent sentinels. You stay at the edge of the fire's reach, watching, listening. The people here are busy. They stack stones with care, some flat and square, others tall and narrow, building. Low walls, upright markers. There's a rhythm to it, as if the work itself is part of a ceremony. Someone sings softly, a tune so old it seems to come from the earth itself. You realize what you're seeing: a burial. The stones, once just silent witnesses, are being asked to remember, to hold the name, the story, the soul of the one now laid to rest beneath their weight. You step closer, the fire's warmth brushing your face, and one of the mourners glances up but says nothing. You nod, respectful, and take a place on the edge of the circle, watching as they position the final stone, a great slab shaped like a crude door sealing the tomb. Historians still debate whether these early grave markers were meant as protection for the dead, a guide for their spirits, or simply as a message to the living. Here lies someone. Remember them. You kneel beside one of the stones, fingers tracing its edge. The surface is rough, chipped in places, but firm. Enduring. Fun fact: the oldest known human burial site with deliberate stone markers is from about 100,000 years ago. That's older than farming, older than domesticated animals, older than the idea of kings or gods. Just people asking rocks to help them remember. The mourners sit now quiet, the fire crackling between them. You hear snatches of words, names perhaps, or blessings, maybe both. The stones loom over the gathering, their shadows dancing on the ground, and you can't help but feel the weight of history in them. These stones aren't just rocks anymore. They're memory made solid, a promise carved into the land. One of the mourners places a hand on the tallest stone head, bowed, as if listening for something. Maybe they're hoping to hear the voice of the departed. Maybe they're hoping the stone itself will speak. Historians still can't agree whether these rituals were meant to communicate with the dead, with the spirits of the land, or simply with the future, leaving a message for those who would pass this way long after the mourners were gone. The fire pops, sending a swirl of sparks into the night. You lean back on your heels, staring at the stones. There's a strange comfort in their presence. The world changes, people come and go, but the stones stay. They remember when we cannot. And here's a strange thought to keep you company tonight. Elephants have been known to touch and linger near the bones of their dead, as if mourning. It seems we're not the only creatures who ask the earth to help us remember. Maybe the first human to place a stone on a grave did so because they saw another creature doing it first. You rise as the ceremony ends, the mourners slipping away into the dark, leaving the stones to their silent vigil. You touch one last marker, a low, flat slab at your feet, and whisper your own farewell. The stone doesn't reply, but then it doesn't need to. Its presence says enough. You walk on the stars, wheeling overhead, the ground firm beneath your feet, and behind you, the stones keep their watch as they always have, as they always will. The dawn is little more than a pale smudge along the horizon when you find yourself following a narrow trail, the earth hard beneath your feet, scattered with shards of flint and fragments of bone. The land is waking up. If you can call it that, birds call out unseen in the mist. And somewhere in the distance, water murmurs over stone. You stoop to pick up a sharp-edged rock, its surface glinting in the early light. It fits neatly in your hand, weighty, solid. And just like that, you feel the quiet thrill of discovery, the connection to ancestors who once stood where you stand, stone tool in hand, ready to shape survival out of silence. You examine the flint, turning it this way and that. The edge has been chipped with purpose, the marks of a skilled hand still visible despite the centuries. You can almost see the maker crouched on a similar dawn, striking stone against stone, coaxing a blade from the unyielding core. Historians still debate whether the creation of stone tools was driven by necessity alone, or if there was also pride, artistry, even a sense of dialogue between human and rock, between intention and result. You try it yourself, picking up another stone and striking the two together. Sparks fly, a brief, bright conversation between rock and air, and the edge of your flint grows sharper. There's something deeply satisfying in the act. It feels like the rock is answering you, offering up its strength in return for your effort. Fun fact: some of the earliest stone tools we've found date back over 2.5 million years. That's so old that if you tried to write out the number of generations between us and those first tool makers, you'd run out of paper before you ran out of ancestors. You keep working, chipping away, the sound of stone on stone echoing across the empty land. The rhythm of it is calming, almost meditative. Each strike is like a word, a phrase in the oldest language you know. The rock speaks through its shape, its willingness to break just so to become something useful, something that can carve, cut, defend. As the sun climbs burning away the mist, you spot more tools scattered along the trail, broken spear points, the shattered remains of axes, the cores from which blades were struck. A litter of ancient conversations left behind by those who came before. You kneel to study them, fingertips tracing their lines, trying to read their silent messages. Historians still puzzle over whether these discarded tools were simply waste, or whether they were left deliberately offerings to the land, the ancestors, the stones themselves. And here's a strange tidbit for you: certain species of sea otters use rocks as tools, two cracking open shellfish on flat stones, balanced on their bellies. Maybe they too are having a word with the stone, asking it for help in their own way. You sling a newly sharpened blade at your side and move on the weight of it comforting against your hip. With each step, the ground crunches beneath you, stone talking to stone. You feel part of a lineage stretching back to those first tool makers, the ones who figured out that rocks could answer not in words but in edges and points, in fire-sparking flakes and sharp splinters. The land opens up ahead, wide and wild, and you smile, thinking of the countless hands that shaped it, stone by stone, tool by tool. The conversation continues as it always has. And you're just the latest speaker trying to understand the oldest language of all. The sun is a pale coin low in the sky when you stumble into a broad valley. Its floor scattered with standing stones that rise like frozen giants from the earth. Some are slim and sharp as spears. Others are squat and broad, their surfaces etched by wind rain and the quiet insistence of time. The stones stand alone in pairs in crooked lines, as if caught mid-conversation, and you can't help but wonder who set them here and what were they trying to say. You step among them, boots crunching on frost-brittle grass, and the weight of their presence settles on you like a heavy cloak. The tallest of them towers overhead, its shadow stretching across the ground like a long finger pointing nowhere. You pause before it resting your palm against its cold, rough surface. You speak a greeting, perhaps, or a question. But as always, the stone remains silent. Still. You feel that ancient urge rise in your chest, the need to address the unanswering, to give voice to awe, or fear, or longing. Historians still debate whether these stones were God's guardians or simply markers, monuments to the power of the land or the people who placed them. Whatever the truth, it's clear that our ancestors asked something of the stones: prayers, protection, meaning in a world that often refused to provide it. You wander between the stones, the wind sighing through gaps and cracks, making them hum and whistle like ancient flutes. The sound is eerie, beautiful, like the valley itself is trying to remember the songs that once filled it. Fun fact: in Brittany, France, the Carnac stones form long parallel rows stretching for miles. Some believe they were aligned for spiritual purposes. Others think they marked processional routes or served as early calendars. Either way, they speak of a people who saw the divine in stone. You sit on a low, flat boulder, letting the cold seep into your bones, and watch the play of light and shadow as the sun drifts lower. The stones seem to shift as the day dies, their edges blurring their shapes, softening until you can almost imagine them moving, speaking, answering. You murmur to them, words lost in the wind, and for a moment the valley feels less empty. A crow lands atop one of the stones, cocking its head as if listening. It lets out a harsh cry, then flies off, its wings black against the fading sky. You chuckle softly. Even the birds talk to the rocks, you whisper. And maybe they do. Maybe we're all trying to find our place in this conversation. Historians still can't agree whether the standing stones were places of worship, of warning, or of gathering. Some argue they were sites of sacrifice, others that they were meeting points, places where the scattered threads of early human lives were tied together. Whatever the truth, the stones endured, their silence louder than any song. The first stars prick the sky as you rise, brushing frost from your clothes. You give the tallest stone a parting pat, a thank you, or maybe just a promise to return. And as you walk away, you feel its gaze on your back, a god, a guardian, or simply a rock keeping its secrets as stones always do. The night deepens as you follow a narrow path that winds between low hills. The moon hangs like a silver hook in the sky, and its light bathes the land in pale shadows. You crest a rise, breath catching in your throat at the sight below a great circle of stones, vast and solemn, each one positioned with a precision that feels deliberate, as if placed by a hand that knew the language of the earth. The stones stand like sentries, their tops catching the moonlight so that they glow faintly, their shapes reflected in shallow pools of rainwater. You descend toward the circle, boots crunching on gravel, and step between the massive stones. Here in this place you feel small. The stones dwarf you, their ancient silence pressing close. You move slowly, running a hand along one stone's flank. The surface is cold, rough with the marks of wind and time. You speak softly, half afraid your voice might disturb something best left sleeping. But the stones, as always, give no reply. They simply are enduring, unmoved. Historians still debate whether these stone circles were built for ceremonies for watching the stars or for something else entirely. Some argue they were calendars marking solstices and equinoxes, while others suggest they were places of burial, of sacrifice, of gathering. The truth. Lost, perhaps, as the builders are lost, swallowed by the same silence that wraps these stones. You pause at the center of the circle, looking up at the sky framed by stone. The stars wheel overhead, ancient and familiar. Fun fact, stone circles aren't unique to Britain's famous Stonehenge. They dot the world from the Callanish stones in Scotland to the megaliths of Senegal and Gambia, each one a conversation with the heavens written in stone. You sit on a fallen slab, feeling its cool weight beneath you, and listen. The wind sighs through the gaps, making the stones sing low and eerie. The sound tugs at something deep inside, a memory. You don't have, a longing you can't name. You murmur a greeting, a question, a joke, anything to fill the quiet, but it's the wind that answers, not the stone. A shooting star streaks overhead, bright and brief. You smile, thinking of those who once stood here watching the same sky, asking the same questions. Historians still can't agree whether these circles were meant to map the heavens or to bring people together, binding scattered tribes with shared wonder. What's certain is that they endure, these circles, these conversations frozen in stone. You rise, brushing dirt from your hands, and walk the perimeter one last time, fingers trailing along the weathered edges. The stones keep their secrets as they always have, but tonight in their silent company you feel less alone beneath the stars. The dawn creeps in soft and pink, painting the sky with streaks of color as you leave the circle behind. The land spreads out before you, a patchwork of grass, rock, and scattered trees. You walk on, drawn by something you can't quite name, until you find yourself on a ridge overlooking a strange sight. A field where massive stones are laid out, not in circles or lines, but in patterns that echo the stars above. You pause, breath misting in the morning chill, and feel that familiar pull, the urge to speak, to ask, to understand. You scramble down the slope, boots slipping on loose soil, and weave between the stones. They vary in size, some tall as a man, others no bigger than your hand. But together, they form a map, or what looks like one. The arrangement is too precise to be chance. You lie on your back in the frost-damp grass, gaze up at the sky, and see how the stones mirror the constellations fading in the growing light. Historians still debate whether these ancient layouts were built to track the stars, to honor them, or to beg their favor. You whisper to the nearest stone, fingers tracing its rough edge. Show me the way, you say, though you don't know what path you hope to find. The stone, of course, says nothing, but in its silent presence you feel steadier, as if the land itself has answered. Fun fact. The Nabta Playa stones in southern Egypt, arranged more than 7,000 years ago, are thought to mark the summer solstice, one of the oldest known examples of humans using stones to track the heavens. A soft wind stirs, carrying the scent of dry grass and cold earth. The stones cast long shadows that shift as the sun climbs, their shapes changing with the light like figures in a slow dance. You walk among them, imagining the hands that place them, the eyes that watch the stars and saw meaning in their movements. Historians still can't agree if these sites were observatories, temples, or something in between. A bridge between earth and sky, stone and star. You crouch beside one small stone, its top smoothed by countless seasons of rain. Someone long ago carved a shallow groove along one edge, a line that points toward the horizon where the sun now rises. You smile, feeling the cleverness of that unknown hand across time. A guide, a marker, a message written in stone. Overhead, a flock of birds wheels through the brightening sky, their cries sharp and wild. You rise, stretching the stiffness from your limbs, and look once more at the field of stones. They are a dialogue frozen in place, a conversation between people and cosmos, written not in words but in rock and shadow, light and season. You turn away at last, footsteps crunching on frost, and head toward the distant hills. The stones remain behind, their silent map spread for any who would read it, their message waiting beneath the stars. The morning wears on as you walk the ground beneath your feet, turning from soft grass to hard-packed earth, scattered with shards of stone. The air smells of dust and sunlight, and in the distance you see cliffs rising from the plain, their faces marked by time and wind. As you draw closer, you spot them, lines and shapes carved into the rock so old that lichen grows in their grooves. You pause at the base of the cliff, tilting your head to trace the patterns. Spirals, figures, strange animals, symbols. It's as if the stone itself is trying to speak. You step closer, running your fingers over the carvings. The cuts are deep, deliberate. These weren't idle scratches or careless marks. No, someone meant to say something here, something they hoped would last. Petroglyphs, you remember, are among the earliest forms of symbolic communication, messages that outlived their makers by millennia. Historians still debate whether these carvings were art, record, prayer, or all of the above. You study one figure in particular, a line with outstretched arms, a stick figure dancing perhaps, or reaching for the sky. What were you saying, you murmur? The stone doesn't answer, but the question hangs there between you and the rock, as if the ancient carver's voice might still echo inside the groove. Fun fact, petroglyph sites have been found on every continent except Antarctica. Some, like those at Fontaine in Namibia or the Coso Range in California, feature thousands of figures. Clearly, once we learned how to make a mark, we couldn't stop. You smile at that. The human urge to leave a message is stronger than time itself. You move along the cliff face, reading the story as best you can. A circle within a circle may be the sun or a shield. A spiral may be a journey or a trap. A line of dots, footprints. Stars, historians still argue about these meanings. Were they warnings, maps, or simply ways to say, "We were here"? The truth, of course, is locked in stone, and the stone keeps its secrets well. You take out your own flint blade, tracing its edge along the air, tempted to add your own mark. But you hesitate. The carvings feel sacred in a way. A conversation started long before you were born and not yours to interrupt. Instead, you press your palm flat against the rock, feeling the warmth of the sun stored in the stone's skin, and whisper a greeting. The petroglyphs glow faintly in the afternoon light, as if acknowledging your presence. You sit at the cliff's base, the rock at your back, and watch as shadows shift across the carvings, bringing some into sharp relief, hiding others. The stone speaks in its own way, through light, through shadow, through the silent persistence of lines carved by forgotten hands. When you finally rise, brushing dust from your clothes, you feel as though you've read a book written before books existed, a story without words. A dialogue across time, carved into the bones of the earth. And as you walk away, the petroglyphs remain behind, their message, waiting for the next wanderer to listen. The afternoon deepens, the sun casting long, slanting rays that turn the world gold and shadowed. You follow a narrow path between crumbling hills where the ground crunches underfoot gravel and broken bits of stone that have seen the passage of countless feet. The air is warm now, filled with the dry scent of dust and grass, and ahead, nestled in the hollow of a slope, you see them, great slabs of rock laid flat like the pages of some enormous book. You pause, heart thudding a little faster. Here it seems the stone has been asked to remember. You step closer, boots scuffing loose soil, and kneel beside the nearest slab. Its surface is etched with lines deep, deliberate, worn smooth in places by the brush of wind and time. Figures, symbols, stories all laid out as if to be read by anyone patient enough to learn the language. You reach out, fingertips tracing the grooves, feeling the coolness of the stone, the weight of ages beneath your hand. Historians still debate whether these stone records were meant for the living, for the dead, or for the gods, or perhaps all three at once. You sit back on your heels and take in the scene, stones arranged in rough rows, some flat, some leaning, others toppled and half buried. Together they form a kind of library without walls, memory carved into rock because no voice could carry far enough. No skin or bark could last long enough. Fun fact: in parts of India, ancient petroglyphs are known as Katha Shila story stones because they were believed to hold the narratives of entire communities scratched into rock so the land itself would remember. A breeze stirs, sending dust swirling across the slabs, and you brush it away gently, uncovering a spiral within a spiral, a maze of lines that draws your eye inward. A journey, perhaps, a map, or a riddle no one now can solve. Historians still argue over these designs. Were they meant to teach, to warn, to guide, or were they simply offerings to the stone itself, a gift of story, in return for the stone's silent strength? You lie back, head pillowed on a fallen stone, and watch the clouds drift across the sky. The stones keep their vigil as they have for untold generations. The carvings seem to hum beneath your skin, not with sound, but with presence, with the weight of memory made solid. You wonder about the hands that made these marks. What were they trying to say? And did they ever feel as you do now that the stone was listening? Overhead, a hawk wheels through the sky, its shadow flickering over the stones, and you grin. Even the birds seem drawn to these ancient records. And speaking of memory keepers, did you know that some crows can remember human faces for years, even decades? Maybe that's why they linger near these places, because they too understand the importance of remembrance. The sun dips lower, the light softening, and you rise, brushing dust from your clothes. You walk slowly among the stones, giving each one a nod, a silent farewell. The stone remembers what people forget, and for that you feel grateful. The slabs lie quiet behind you, their stories safe, waiting for the next wanderer to pause, to listen, to trace the lines, and try as you did to understand. The sun leans low, bleeding orange across the horizon as you pick your way down an ancient trail where the ground is scored with ruts and grooves worn by generations of feet, hooves, and wheels. The air hums with the soft drone of insects, and somewhere in the distance, a river glimmers like a sliver of glass. You follow the trail towards it, drawn by the faint clang of stone on stone. As you crest a small rise, the sound grows clearer, rhythmic, purposeful, the music of traders at work. Below at the river's edge, a cluster of people huddle around a flat rock, unpacking bundles, untying leather thongs. They work swiftly, unwrapping precious cargo, small, smooth stones, each carved or painted with strange symbols, each cradled as carefully as if it were made of gold. You watch as one trader passes a stone to another, murmuring words you can't quite catch. The stones pass from hand to hand like messages, as if the traders aren't just exchanging goods, but silent greetings between distant lands. You step closer, boots crunching on gravel, and one of the traders looks up, giving you a wary nod. You return it, crouching beside their work. The stones are beautiful, polished by river and hand-marked with spirals, dots, and figures. You pick one up, feeling its cool weight, the grooves of its carving fitting your thumb as if made for it. Historians still debate whether these traded stones were talismans, currency, or messages, tokens that carried meaning as well as value. A trader gestures to the stone you hold, then to a pile of furs at his feet. The exchange is clear stone for skin, memory for warmth. You smile and set the stone back, not ready to part with your cloak just yet. Fun fact, in parts of prehistoric Europe, decorated stones have been found far from where their materials originated, suggesting trade routes that crossed rivers, forests, even mountain ranges. Stones weren't just objects, they were ideas on the move. The traders speak softly among themselves as they pack their goods, tying stones into bundles with care. You sense that these aren't just wares to them. Each stone carries a fragment of story, a bit of the land it came from, the hands that shaped it. Historians still argue whether these traveling stones were meant to link communities, spread beliefs, or simply to profit the cleverest merchants. Perhaps, like so much of history, it was all of these at once. You help lift a heavy bundle onto a trader's back, feeling the tug of its weight, the solidity of stone mixed with the promise of far-off places. The group sets off along the trail, their footsteps stirring dust, their voices low and steady. You watch them go, the stones swaying at their sides like quiet companions. As the last of them disappears into the dusk, you sit by the river, tossing a pebble into the water and watching the ripples already. Stones you think were always meant to travel, always meant to carry more than just their own weight. And tonight the river carries your thoughts downstream to places you'll never see. Night settles like a blanket over the land, the stars flickering to life one by one as you follow a narrow path that hugs the edge of a dense forest. The moon rides high, casting silver light across the trail, and with each step, the world feels quieter, emptier, until ahead you spot a curious sight. A cluster of stones stacked in a careful pile, balanced so precisely it seems a breath might topple them. You slow, drawn toward it, a heart ticking faster. Someone built this. Someone left it here, a message in rock, and you've just stumbled into the middle of the conversation. You crouch beside the cairn, studying it in the moonlight. The stones are flat and smooth, chosen with care, stacked in a tower that leans ever so slightly toward the east. A marker. A warning. You glance around, but the path winds on into shadow. No sign of who might have placed it. Historians still debate whether such piles were meant as guides for travelers, signals of danger, or memorials for the lost. Whatever the purpose, this cairn speaks in the oldest language of all. Pay attention. You run your fingers along the base stone, its surface cool and damp with dew. A groove runs across it, worn or carved, you can't tell, and you wonder if it points to something. You scan the trees, the sky, the ground, looking for what the stones want you to see. Fun fact, in the Arctic, Inuit hunters built Inuksuk stone markers shaped like people or towers to guide them across the ice and warn of thin spots or hidden dangers. Even in the harshest lands, we spoke to rocks, and we listened when they answered. A soft wind stirs, rustling the trees, and the cairn hums faintly, the stones shifting against one another with a sound like a sigh. You grin, half tempted to reply. I hear you, you whisper. The wind carries your words into the night, and the cairn keeps its silent watch. You rise and follow the path onward, but now your eyes are sharper, your ears tuned to the language of the land. Another stack of stones appears farther along, this one smaller, more hurriedly built, as if warning of something closer, more immediate. A bend in the trail reveals a steep drop just beyond the ground, falling away into darkness. You catch your breath, heart hammering. The stones spoke true in their way. They warned you and you listened. Historians still puzzle over how far these stone signals stretched, whether they marked vast networks of travel or simply guided local hunters and gatherers. What's clear is that stones became more than landscape. They became messengers, guardians, silent sentinels of the trails we walked. You pause one last time, placing a pebble atop the second cairn, adding your voice to the silent dialogue. The stone wobbles, then settles, and you nod satisfied. Then you move on into the dark, leaving the cairns behind, their quiet warning, lingering in your mind like a half-heard song. The night deepens, and the moon's glow softens to a haze as you tread further into the wilds, your boots whispering over moss and stone. The forest falls away and you find yourself on a wide, bare plain, where the ground is cracked and dry, scattered with boulders that crouch like watchful beasts. But there at the edge of a shallow rise, you see them shapes carved from stone, faces weathered by wind and time, statues, effigies, silent questions frozen in rock. You approach slowly, as if afraid to disturb their vigil. The figures are rough but unmistakable heads, torsos, long arms folded across chests, empty eyes staring out toward the horizon. You stand before the largest of them, its face pocked with a lichen, its mouth a faint, uneven line. You reach out, fingers brushing its cheek, and feel the cool, unyielding stone. "What were you asking?" You murmur, your voice small in the vast night. Historians still debate the purpose of such sculptures. Were they God's guardians, or simply questions given form, our ancestors' way of asking the world for answers it refused to give? Some believe these statues were meant to watch over the land, to bridge the gap between human and divine. Others think they were offerings to the questions themselves, carved in hopes the earth might reply. You circle the statues' moonlight, casting strange shadows across their faces. The eyes seem to follow you, though you know it's only the play of light and your weary mind. Fun fact: the Moai statues of Easter Island, those giant heads and torsos that have become icons, were carved between 1400 and 1650 CE, but smaller, older stone figures have been found across the world, from Siberia to the Andes, all asking questions we can no longer understand. You crouch at the base of one figure, noticing lines etched along its sides, patterns that might be clothing, armor, or simply decoration. A handprint, faint but deliberate, marks its base. Someone once touched this stone as you do now, shaping it, speaking to it with chisel and hammer. The wind hums low, threading through cracks in the stone, and for a moment you almost think you hear a reply, a whisper just beyond meaning. Historians still argue whether these statues were meant for the living or the dead, for the spirits or the stars. Maybe they were meant for the stone itself, a way of saying, "We see you. We know you're watching, and we're watching too." You lean back against a smaller figure, feeling the chill of the rock seep into your skin. The plain stretches silent around you, the statues keeping their vigil, the night deep and still. A shooting star slices across the sky, and you smile, the light fading as quickly as it came. You rise, brushing dust from your hands, and give the nearest figure a nod. Whatever question it once asked, it waits still for an answer. And perhaps in its own way, the stone waits for yours. You walk on the statues, shrinking behind you, their silent questions lingering in your thoughts like echoes on the wind. The night begins to give way, the first hints of dawn bleeding into the sky like water into dry sand. The air cools, the world holding its breath as if waiting for something, an answer, perhaps that has been long in coming. You find yourself on a rocky bluff overlooking a valley where mist clings low and thick, hiding the land's scars and secrets. Here at the edge of the world, it seems there are no circles, no carvings, no statues, just stone. Endless, silent stone. You sink to your knees, exhausted, and rest your hands on a flat slab at your side. The rock is rough beneath your palms, solid and cold, indifferent to your touch. You close your eyes and speak soft words, no longer sure whether you're asking the land for guidance or simply filling the quiet so it doesn't swallow you whole. But the stone, as always, does not answer. It listens, perhaps. It endures. But it does not reply. Historians still debate whether we ever truly believed the rocks would speak back, or whether we always knew deep down that the conversation was one-sided. Perhaps the point was never to be heard, but simply to speak to unburden our fears and hopes onto something vast enough to hold them. The wind rises tugging at your hair and you look out over the valley as the sun's edge breaks the horizon. Light spills across the land, turning the stones to gold for a fleeting moment before they fade back to gray. Fun fact: even now in modern times, we keep talking to stones. We build memorials, headstones, monuments, still trying to give voice to what cannot be said, still asking the silent earth to help us remember. You sit there as the day unfolds, the stones at your side as steady as they have always been. And for the first time, you stop asking them for answers. Instead, you offer thanks. Thanks for their patience. Thanks for their presence. Thanks for keeping your words safe when no one else could. And as you rise, the stone remains watching, waiting silent. But perhaps that's its gift after all. Not to answer, but to endure. To remind you that some conversations never end, and that's all right. You walk on the world, brightening around you, the stone's long silence, a comfort rather than a wound. The story of speaking to stones is the story of us, of our endless attempts to find meaning in a world that gives us none. Across 15 sections, you've wandered with your ancestors through caves, valleys, and across plains. You've watched them mark stone with wordless messages, stack it into warnings, carve it into gods, and carry it across wild lands as trade and promise. The stones never answered, not in words, but they held our secrets, bore our hopes, and kept our memories. Even now, we speak to them, to headstones, to monuments, to the very land itself, because sometimes it's enough just to be heard even by something that cannot speak back. And in that long silence, there's a kind of reply if you're quiet enough to hear it.